I never thought I'd see the day someone tried to steal my family's farm using nothing but a fake piece of paper and a smile. When I found that foreclosure notice nailed to my gate, my stomach dropped. Our 180-year-old farmhouse, the one my great-great-grandfather built by hand, was about to be legally taken. And standing across the dirt road, arms folded like she owned the sun itself, was Karen, president of the Willow Creek HOA, watching it all like she'd finally won. I remember that morning like it burned itself into my mind. The fog was still clinging to the cornfields, and I was fixing a fence post when the mail truck rolled up and left a thick envelope. The first thing I noticed was the letterhead, Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. I laughed out loud, because I don't live in any HOA. My land sits a good half, we know from their neatly trimmed lawns and copy-paste houses. I tossed it aside, thinking it was a mistake. But that was my first mistake, assuming Karen ever made mistakes. 2 weeks later, another envelope came. This time, the tone was very different. Notice of violation. Bold red letters at the top. They listed my offenses: improper landscaping, meaning my vegetable garden; non-conforming structure, meaning the 180-year-old barn my great-grandfather raised; and unauthorized outdoor storage, my tractor. Of course, I blinked, reading it twice, then a third time. They were serious. These people were actually trying to claim my farm fell under their HOA rules. So, I called the number listed at the bottom. Willow Creek HOA, this is Karen speaking, came the voice, tight, sharp, dripping superiority. Hi, I think there's been some mistake, I said. You folks keep sending me letters, but I'm not part of your subdivision. Oh, you're the farmer, she said, drawing out the word like it tasted bad. Yes, we've been meaning to speak with you. According to our updated community map, your property is now within our HOA boundaries. You'll need to come into compliance. I laughed. Ma'am, my family's owned this land since before your town existed. I didn't sign anything, and your HOA has no authority here. Karen sighed like she was dealing with a stubborn child. Our legal team disagrees. You'll receive our community covenants and restrictions by mail. And she hung up, just like that. I tried to brush it off, but that conversation stuck to me like tar. Something about her tone, calm, smug, final, told me this wasn't over. A few days later, the documents arrived. A whole packet of HOA nonsense, rules about lawn color, mailbox design, prohibitions on commercial vehicles, even restrictions on what kind of shutters I could have. But what stopped me cold was the attached map. According to their boundaries, the HOA didn't just include their subdivision, it extended into my property, 2 neighboring farms, and part of a state forest. They had literally drawn a circle around half the valley and declared it theirs. That's when I called Jim Wallace, an old lawyer friend of mine who'd been helping my family with land disputes for decades. He flipped through the documents, shaking his head. This is amateur fraud, Jack. They can't just decide you're part of their HOA because they redrew a map. I'll send them a letter. I thought that would be the end of it. Jim's letters had a way of stopping nonsense fast. But a month later, I got a new letter from a big city law firm representing the HOA claiming I owed $847 in community fees and was in continued violation for running a commercial enterprise without HOA approval. My commercial enterprise? Farming. On my farm. That's when my blood started to boil. I called Jim again, and he didn't even bother hiding his anger. They're not stupid, he said. They're testing you. They want you scared enough to pay. But if we push back, We'll see just how deep this goes. For a few weeks, I tried to ignore them. Then came the letter that nearly made my heart stop. Notice of lien, it said, in bold letters. The HOA had filed a lien on my property for unpaid assessments. They were threatening foreclosure if I didn't pay within 30 days. I read that line over and over again until my hands started shaking. That's when it hit me. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was theft, legalized theft, hiding behind paperwork. Jim rushed to the courthouse and pulled the record. What he found was worse than either of us expected. They had actually filed a lien, but they'd used a fake property description, one that didn't match my deed. They'd cited laws that didn't apply, but they knew it would take months to untangle. I couldn't eat that night. I just sat on the porch staring at the old barn, thinking about my father, about how he'd died believing this land would always stay in our name. I felt helpless, angry, and somewhere under all that, scared, for the first time in my life. I doubted myself. Maybe I should just pay the damn fee, make it go away. Maybe that's what Dad would have done. Avoid the fight. Keep the peace. But then I looked at the plaque above the barn door, the one carved by my great-grandfather. This land is ours, as long as we protect it. And that's when I decided I'd rather lose everything fighting than live knowing I'd let someone steal what 5 generations built. Jim came up with a plan. Let's not rush, he said. Let them think they're winning. Let them file every false claim they can. We'll catch them in their own web. We started digging. Jim's paralegal went through county records, bank filings, even old HOA minutes. What we found was like peeling back rot. They'd pulled the same stunt on 3 neighboring farms, sending intimidating letters, claiming fees, even collecting money from 2 elderly couples who'd paid out of fear. And that wasn't all. They'd billed the county for maintenance of land they didn't own, public land. Karen's HOA wasn't just overreaching, it was a racket. A month later, just as we predicted, I got the foreclosure notice. They'd gone all in. They even listed interested buyers, who turned out to be Karen herself and 2 other board members. Their plan was to force me to sell the farm at auction, then flip it to developers for a profit. That's when Jim smiled for the first time in weeks. Perfect, he said. They just committed real, traceable fraud. The next morning, we filed a full civil suit. Fraud, conspiracy, harassment, property interference, and violation of state consumer protection laws. We named the HOA, all 5 board members, their law firm, and their management company. But Jim didn't stop there. He sent everything we'd gathered, letters, invoices, the fake maps, to the state attorney general and the FBI's local field office. Mail fraud and property interference, he said. That's federal. Within days, it blew up. Investigators raided the HOA office, seizing computers and bank records. The news spread fast. Willow Creek HOA under federal investigation. Turns out, Karen had a history. She'd run a similar scam in Florida years ago and fled before charges stuck. Now, she was back at it, only bolder. Neighbors who'd once sneered at my muddy boots suddenly kept their distance. Even some HOA members started talking to reporters, admitting they'd been kept in the dark. The pressure mounted fast. A week later, a new lawyer, one who actually sounded professional, called Jim. My clients are willing to remove the lien and settle. We'd like to avoid further escalation. Jim laughed. Your clients tried to steal a man's farm. Escalation is the least of their worries. We demanded everything: immediate removal of the lien, public apology, repayment of all legal costs, $50,000 in damages, and restitution to the other victims, and, most importantly, the dissolution of the HOA. When Karen heard that, she lost it. She showed up at my property gate in person, furious, shaking, calling me a parasite, ruining her community's image. I didn't say a word. I just pointed to the camera Jim had installed on the fence. She froze, realizing every word was being recorded. Then she stormed off, cursing. Her perfect suburban composure cracked wide open. 2 weeks later, the state attorney general's office froze the HOA's bank accounts. The local news ran a story showing Karen being led out of her home in handcuffs. The headline read, "HOA president arrested in multi-state fraud investigation." I watched it on TV, coffee in hand, and for the first time in months, I laughed. A quiet, bitter kind of laugh. But it felt good. The HOA collapsed overnight. The rest of the board cut plea deals, blaming each other. The law firm lost its license for enabling the scam. Karen ended up serving 3 years in prison. And that shiny subdivision she'd fought so hard to protect? Their property values tanked. No one wanted to buy in a neighborhood known as the HOA fraud zone. I didn't throw a party. I didn't celebrate. I just went out to the barn, ran my hand over the old wooden beam my father used to lean against, and breathed. The lien was gone. The land was mine again, just as it always should have been. A few months later, one of the young families from Willow Creek stopped by. The husband apologized, said he hadn't known what the HOA was doing. "We just wanted a nice place to live," he said. "We didn't realize what it cost you." I told him it was fine, because, in a way, I'd gotten something I didn't expect. Peace. Not the quiet kind, but the solid kind that comes when you stand your ground and win it back. Now, when I look across the fields, I don't just see the crops or the old fences. I see the line my family drew generations ago, and I finally understand what they meant. Because sometimes, the only way to keep what's yours is to fight for it. A lesson. Power means nothing when it's built on lies. Truth always reclaims its ground.